Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So thank you very much for very kind introduction. First of all, I must be thankful to International Shari'ah Research Academy and the other associates, Institute of Islamic Banking and Insurance, Thomson Reuters, and the sponsor Westlaw Business for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts on Sharia governance. Actually, this is a topic I have been talking on, and I've been trying to convince the authorities that there is a need for regulation of Sharia advisory services. This seems very odd that this kind of request comes from someone who offers Sharia advisory services. But I believe that for the development of Islamic banking and finance in general, and of course for authenticity of Sharia advisory services, it is important to bring discipline to this very important aspect of Islamic banking and finance. In this presentation, my major focus would be on emphasizing that there is a need for regulation of Sharia advisory services. And of course, how Sharia advisory processes can be implemented on the product level, institution level, country level, and of course in a global context. The relevant bodies to Sharia advisory services, Sharia advisory processes, or Sharia governance system are of course Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institution, which offers Sharia or which issues Sharia standards governing the practice of Islamic banking and finance, Islamic Financial Services Board, which has played a very important role in coming up with regulatory standards and governance standards for the Islamic financial services industry. And lately, I would say that International Sharia Research Academy, this has become a relevant player in the Sharia advisory services. And of course, I think a very important role can be and must be played by the regulators and authorities when it comes to Sharia advisory services. Without active involvement of regulators and authorities in Islamic banking and finance in general and Sharia advisory processes in particular, all these efforts by Islamic Financial Services Board or Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions may be just academic or intellectual endeavors. If these things are not made binding by an authority, by a regulator, all these things are actually very good academic exercises. Referring to IFSP exposure draft, this is something which Maslan has already covered. This is the crux of the Sharia advisory. An institution offering Islamic financial services shall have in place an appropriate mechanism for obtaining ruling from Sharia scholars, applying fatwa, and monitoring Sharia compliance in all aspects of their products, operations, and activities. This is all about Sharia advisory services. IFSB prefers to call it Sharia governance system. As someone who's involved in Sharia advisory services, I would like to, from market viewpoint, I would like to call it Sharia advisory services. Now, this is actually Sharia offering or provision of Sharia advisory services. This is a process in which a number of players play an important role. Sharia coordination is extremely important. And Sharia coordination is done in different ways. This Sharia coordination function may be within a financial institution, or it can be outside a financial institution offering Islamic financial services, and we have examples of both. Product development team plays an important role in Sharia advisory services process. Compliance and tax people within organizations, legal counsel, internal legal counsel or external law firms, and of course Sharia scholars play a very, very important role. So this Sharia advisory process or Sharia governance system has these system viewpoint, not from the outside. But this is, I would say, these are the major ingredients of Sharia advisory process. Or if I just come up with the players, scholars, or Sharia advisory firms, regulators, AOFE, Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions, and or Islamic Financial Services Board, and others. These are the major players in Sharia advisory domain. Mazlan mentioned different models of Sharia advisory. I divide them into micro and macro. And there is no contradiction between what I am saying and what has previously been said. On a micro level, I would say that there are three ways of ensuring or three ways of procuring Sharia advisory services. The classical model is that of an embedded Sharia board. An emerging model is that of Sharia advisory firms. And of course, there is a model which is actually no model, i.e. Getting fatwa where it is easy to procure from. So fatwa shopping, this is something, this is a term which has been coined by some of the journalists. So Sharia board, Sharia advisory firm, and no system, i.e. get the fatwa where it is easier to get it from. The embedded Sharia supervisory board model, this is the most tested model. Almost all Islamic banks in the world, I would say probably all Islamic banks now, they have their own Sharia supervisory boards. And these Sharia supervisory boards have varied membership. In one case, probably if it's a fund or a sukuk structure, there is possible that only one Sharia scholar comprises the Sharia board. You would find that the number of Sharia scholars sitting on a Sharia board is about 3. If you go to Kuwait and Qatar, the number of Sharia scholars sitting on a Sharia board may be up to 7. So depending on which country you go to, the number of Sharia scholars sitting on a Sharia board is different. In some jurisdictions, for example, DIFC, Dubai International Financial Center, it is a requirement that the number of Sharia scholars should be at least 3. This is the case in case of Bank Nagara, Malaysia as well. And where there is some guideline, so the guideline suggests that these members of the Sharia board should be recognized scholars. And there is a distinction between a recognized scholar and a qualified scholar. When Islamic banking and finance started, there were no qualifications in Sharia advisory services. And now we have started finding some kind of qualifications being offered by some institutions. EOFE, for example, has a certified program for Sharia advisors. So that is one qualification. But because of the lack of recognized qualification available, and because of the fact that many Sharia scholars who advised different Islamic banks and financial institutions did not come from some kind of formal Sharia background, and a kind of compromised term was that whosoever is advising a bank or financial institution in Sharia matters should at least be recognized by the market as someone who possesses the required knowledge and expertise to do so. But this trend, I think, is going to change in future, given that now there are qualifications available. In future, only qualified people would be sitting on the Sharia supervisory board, if these Sharia supervisory board remain in practice. I really don't know whether this model is going to persist in the market or not. And of course, this is a kind of perception that these the Sharia scholars sitting on Sharia boards, they serve as external consultants. They are not employees of the organization they are advising. Sharia advisory firms, this is a relatively recent phenomenon, starting at the end of 1990s, when one firm was set up here in this city of London. So London has contributed to Sharia advisory firms model. And after the success of this model, a number of new Sharia advisory firms have mushroomed. My own last count is that there are about 70 Sharia advisory firms now claiming to be operating in Islamic banking and finance. Some of these Sharia advisory firms are authentic, i.e. they have resources to do so, and others, right, well, in my observation, they are just one-man show. The person might have a day job, but at night the person is running a Sharia advisory firm as well. But these Sharia advisory firms, okay, looking at the 70 odd Sharia advisory firms, we find that some of them are completely independent, i.e. they are set up by some individuals, okay, some companies. An increasing number of Sharia advisory firms are now actually owned by scholars themselves. This is, some people would say this is a positive trend. Previously, for banks and financial institutions, it was difficult to deal with the scholars on certain matters. Indemnity, for example. You talk about indemnity with a scholar, the scholar would say, well, this is the door, go away. And now that these scholars, some of these scholars have set up advisory firms, then, well, you are actually dealing with a firm. In that case, as Mazlan said, you can actually negotiate better terms. So Sharia scholars setting up Sharia advisory firms, I think this is bringing some kind of more professionalization in Sharia advisory services market. Some of the Sharia advisory firms are actually owned by Islamic banks, like Darul Sharia. This is a Sharia advisory firm which has spun off Dubai Islamic Bank. So this is one example of a bank owning a Sharia advisory firm. There are some institutions offering Sharia advisory services. They are owned by multiple institutions. There are a few examples in Malaysia. Some banks, okay, would claim on their websites and their corporate material that they offer Sharia advisory services as well. So this is another model. Many law firms, when you look at the prospectuses of sukuk and other capital market transactions, when it comes to Sharia advisors, you find that there is a law firm serving as Sharia advisors as well. So Sharia advisory firms may take different forms, owned by individuals, owned by non-scholar individuals, owned by scholars, owned by banks, owned by a number of institutions, banks, Islamic banks and others offering Sharia advisory services, and of course law firms. This is the implementation of Sharia governance system. And fatwa shopping, this is the very easy route for any bank and financial institution wishing to get advice from a Sharia scholar or from a number of Sharia scholars. It has its own flexibility, where you don't have to have a Sharia board on a retainer basis. It's very cost effective. There's no commitment. Once you have set up a Sharia board, actually you have committed yourself to Islamic finance, and it becomes a reputation risk. You have got 3 to 5 Sharia scholars sitting on your Sharia board, and somehow your Islamic business has gone down, and you want to go away from it, but going to scholars and saying to them that, oh, actually we don't need your services, this is actually something very serious, given that the institution may wish to come back to Islamic finance when the market conditions improve. And those institutions, especially Western institutions, which prefer to go for fatwa shopping, for them, it's actually in many cases free access to services. Some banks would say that no, we are not interested in procuring a fatwa. You as my client are interested in Sharia compliant product. Why don't you go to a Sharia scholar or Sharia board, or if you are an institution, you have your own Sharia board, come up with a fatwa and we will accept it. that fatwa actually can be used by this Western institution to sell the products elsewhere as well. Sharia coordination. It is a very, very important function within Sharia advisory services business. As I said, there are different players: product development, compliance people, Sharia scholars, legal counsel. And it is extremely important that there is one person or one body which actually coordinates the activities in the Sharia advisory process. If you don't have this Sharia coordination function, either within your organization or outside the organization, it becomes extremely difficult to manage Sharia advisory process. Now, there are different models of Sharia coordination. And I've emphasized on Sharia coordination function. It can be internal and it can be external function as well. Most Islamic banks would have this Sharia coordination function as part of their internal mechanisms. A number of banks, especially in the UAE and of course in the wider GCC as well, and here even in UK, we have the banks which would have Sharia coordination departments, whatever be its name, but Sharia coordination function is within the bank's activities. Most Islamic banks would prefer to have a Sharia coordination function within the bank, but some Western banks and financial institutions may not want to have Sharia coordination. Rather, they would like to outsource Sharia coordination to another body, preferably a Sharia advisory firm. In our experience, actually external Sharia coordination function has proven to be more transparent, and it has proven to be more efficient as well. Just by looking at the whole product development process in the context of Sharia advisory, if we start with understanding product specifications, then, well, as a Sharia coordinator, as a Sharia advisor, someone would have to do Sharia analysis, and this conveying of that analysis to Sharia scholars in the right and correct fashion, getting signed off on the structure, afterwards liaising with a law firm or the internal legal counsel of the client to prepare adequate legal documentation in accordance with the approved structure by the scholars, and of course reviewing the legal documentation from Sharia viewpoint, and then procuring fatwa on the final product. And for the review and monitoring side of the story, preparation of Sharia review manual. We have in the recent past, have come up with a very innovative Sharia coordination model. One of our clients, and I'm sharing this experience because we believe that this is a model which should be encouraged because it's more transparent and it's more independent. Right? Allianz Global Investors, for example, wanted to set up a couple of Islamic equity funds, global equity funds, and their Sharia expertise was rather limited at that time. Okay? And they wanted to have something, being a German bank, okay, they wanted to have something really transparent and authentic. Their preference was to have a Sharia supervisory board, which comprises 3 independent members. In addition to that, instead of having that Sharia coordination function in the organization, they appointed a Sharia advisory firm to serve as their Sharia coordinator. So in this case, what Sharia supervisory board actually issues the fatwa, and the Sharia coordinator is responsible for Sharia monitoring. So there is a reporting line between the scholars and the Sharia coordinator, and of course this Sharia coordinator works very closely with the fund manager. So there is a dichotomy, there is a division of fatwa issuance function and monitoring and supervision function. And all these entities are completely separate. They're legal and Sharia scholars, they are independent. Allianz as fund managers is independent of the Sharia coordinator, which happens to be a company set up in a different jurisdiction. So we believe, I think this is only one example. But important message is that there should be, if you want to increase authenticity of Sharia advisory services and processes, we have to create some kind of independence between what Maslan said ex ante function, fatwa issuance, and ex post. Because we don't have, although a number of accounting firms and audit firms, they have developed their Sharia audit and Sharia review capabilities, but at this point in time, we don't have any firm which could claim to specialize in Sharia review and hence sign off on the Sharia aspects of it. So in the interim, before we have a number of Sharia audit and Sharia review companies, I know that there are a few Sharia audit companies now in the Middle East, but they're very few in number. So these Sharia advisory firms actually can play a role in Sharia review and Sharia monitoring, independent of the Sharia scholars who should issue the fatwas on the structures and of course on the legal documentation on all aspects of the product offering. On the macro level, so this was the micro story. Right? So either having an embedded Sharia board or going to a Sharia advisory firm or not having anything. So this is actually the three micro models of Sharia advisory. As rightly pointed out by Maslan and before that Professor Rifat Abdul Karim, there are three actually models, macro models of Sharia advisory. Laissez-faire, while we have nothing to do with the Sharia function. Sharia is not a regulatory function anyway, and this should be completely privatized. The institutions involved in Islamic banking and finance should be responsible for ensuring Sharia compliancy of their products, processes, and everything related with what they are doing. Then there is central regulation. Well, basically, the regulator or an authority playing a very active role in ensuring that there is Sharia governance regime. And I would say that this is a model which I would prefer on a personal level, because this creates a lot of discipline and certainty in Sharia governance regime. And there are some other models which are hybrid models, a bit of regulation and a bit of market as well. Laissez-faire, this is a model adopted almost everywhere, except few countries. Maslan said, well, 5 countries. Other than those 5 countries, whether this is the case of UK, a Western country, or it is Saudi Arabia, UAE, or elsewhere, the regulators would not like to take a Sharia view. So this is something which is the case at this point in time. Not very helpful from the discipline viewpoint, but somehow regulators have taken a view that they would not like to intervene in Sharia matters. Central regulation, as in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei, they have a very active role when it comes to Sharia advisory services. In case of Malaysia, for example, there are 3 Sharia boards, but I'm just focusing on BMB, Malaysia's Sharia Advisory Committee. This is the sole Sharia authority for Islamic banks and takaful companies. For the Capital Markets Transaction Securities Commission has its own Sharia Advisory Committee, and if there are some offshore transactions in Labuan, for example, Labuan Offshore Financial Services Authority has its own Sharia board. But important thing is that this Sharia supervisory body is considered as the supreme Sharia authority in the country. Institutions, banks and takaful companies, other financial institutions may have their own Sharia supervisory committees. And there is a very clear guideline on what should be the composition, what should be the roles and responsibilities of the Sharia Supervisory Committee members, and how should it function. And of course, there is a requirement to set up a secretariat for Sharia advisory function as well. The minimum requirement is that there should be at least one designated person who should serve as Sharia advisory secretary and hence should be responsible for liaising with the authority, in this case, Bank Negara, Malaysia. I believe that Malaysia has provided a good example. It's a good practice when it comes to Sharia advisory services. And of course, there are, from procedural viewpoint, Malaysia provides some other very good examples of doing business in Islamic banking and finance. Focusing on Sharia advisory, I would say that, of course, this model needs to be improved, but given the choice, the central Sharia regulation, this is the model which is going to bring a lot of authenticity to Islamic banking and financial services practices. Now, if we had this kind of model, then a number of, and of course, as I said, it has its own problems. Some of these problems have recently been addressed. For example, the courts on in case of BMB and Murabaha did not consider the rulings issued by the Sharia Advisory Committee of Bank Negara, Malaysia, but now the law has been changed. The courts will have to consider the published rulings of the Sharia Advisory Committee of the Central Bank. So these are the things. Basically, this brings a lot of discipline and certainty. If I sit on a Sharia board in Malaysia and I come up with a statement, Sharia pronouncement or whatever, and this goes to BMB or Securities Commission, and this is found either inconsistent with what has already been decided by the Central Sharia Board, or the Sharia Advisory Board finds it something new, then this is the responsibility of the Central Sharia Board to come up with a view. My personal view or the personal view of an individual Sharia Board wouldn't prevail. But this is decided at the central level. And once this is decided on the central level, so this brings standardization in the country. It's not that one bank is issuing a product based on one principle and the other one is using a completely different set of standards. But on a national level, this brings standardization, and I believe that once these national experiments are successful, this may give rise to a global Sharia standard. Without a national Sharia standard, I cannot think of any global Sharia standard emerging, although people have been talking about it for some time. Hybrid model, this is less than ideal, but at least it's better than the laissez faire. Now I'm coming up with some judgments. IFSP came up with their statements, but they were basically very, I should say, objective. But I have some subjectivity because I would like to argue for something. So in my opinion, hybrid model is not as good as the central governance, the central regulation model. But at least this model has a potential to move towards the central regulation. The countries like Pakistan is one example where hybrid model is being practiced. And then this model, I call it voluntary. In United Arab Emirates, for example, there is no central Sharia advisory board. But the banks and financial institutions, their Sharia boards have come up with what is known as National Council of the Sharia Supervisory Committees of Islamic Financial Institutions. It's a voluntary arrangement, and hopefully, if this is successful, it may lead to setting up the national level Sharia advisory board on the central level, or central bank. What is the way forward? Way forward is basically, at this point in time, Sharia governance should be considered as a national issue. Now we talk about standardization of Islamic practices on a global level. As I said, this is not going to happen unless we have national Sharia standards. Consistency in Sharia opinions, consistency in Sharia practices on national level. once you have achieved that one, and this is possible only through the involvement of the authorities, a regulator, finance ministries, or whatever be the relevant authority, that must get involved. When I say that must get involved, basically this is an argument for them accepting and recognizing Islamic banking and finance. Most regulators who would not like to get into into Sharia advisory, basically they are not committed to Islamic banking and finance. And this is the problem. Okay, the countries which have been, and so Malaysia is one example, which actually have been involved in this kind of activities, Sharia advisory, Islamic banking and finance, they have benefited from this one. This non-committal kind of approach, oh, Sharia is not our domain, we are not going to do anything about it, there are reputation risks for us, and there's so many other risks. This approach is not helpful. The countries which have shown some kind of, the authorities which have shown some kind of strategic involvement in Islamic banking and finance and in Sharia advisory, they have benefited from Islamic banking and growth in Islamic banking and finance in those jurisdictions. Once we have achieved, say, 3, 4, 5 national Sharia standards, it will be easier for us to come up with a global Sharia standard, and this is something all of us are aiming for, and hopefully this is achievable once we have at least these 5 countries, Maslan, you have mentioned, if they become, if they coordinate amongst themselves and come up with a committee of the persons coming from these 5 countries, they can come up with, they can decide on kind of mini global standard, and hopefully that will be start for a global Sharia standard for